A washi box!
Breaking news, folks. Pikmin are on the loose. With Nintendo's latest release of Pikmin 4, you may be wondering, who are these silly little fellas? Well, you're in luck because we are here today to take you back to where it all began with the original Gamecube title, Pikmin. Pikmin has to be one of my favourite games of all time, so excuse me while I gush over it. I first played it as a kid on the Wii and I have to say it is probably the most stressful game I have ever played. So much so that I had never completed the game until recently. But what is Pikmin? Our journey begins in the middle of space. You are Captain Olimar from the planet Hokate, a well-known navigator who does freight jobs. On this particular day, he has no destination in mind and sets his beloved ship, the Dolphin, on autopilot. While sitting back for a hot cup of tea, he suddenly feels a massive jolt. This causes him to get thrown against the control panel and black out. When he comes to, he awakes on an unknown planet. Thankful for being alive, he then inspects the ship. And it's not looking good. Many essential parts have been scattered around the planet. To make matters worse, his suit's sensors are showing that the planet's atmosphere contains oxygen, which is deadly to his people. Luckily, he has a life support system built into his suit, but his battery will only last 30 more days. That leaves us with a total of 30 ship parts to collect in 30 days. But how will he do this? Well, luckily that's where our silly little fellas come in. Olimar happens across a red onion-shaped device which pops out a seed. Upon uprooting the sprout, he discovers a creature that resembles the Pikmin brown carrots he had in his suit the night before. Little does he know that the fate of his survival will rest on these little creatures. On to you, Josh.
Thanks, Liz. The gameplay of Pikmin is as fascinating and engaging as it is unique. It features a top-down perspective that you might expect to see in a PC RTS game like Age of Empires or Dawn of War, or a CRPG like Fallout or Baldur's Gate. However, unlike both genres, Pikmin is neither of these things. It has elements of RTS games, such as the base building mechanic and the ability to grow an army of minions that you send out on expeditions outside of the base, but ultimately, the similarities end there. I was first shown Pikmin in 2022 by Liz and was grabbed by the combination of this RTS-esque gameplay perspective combined with the unmistakable Nintendo charm. The swarm effects were also impressive as the hardware is so old now, yet it was able to render up to 100 Pikmin simultaneously whilst handling all their different AI.
The impact site. This is where our reluctant adventurer Olimar begins his mission for survival. One of my favourite things about this game is how it starts off rather zoomed in on Olimar with no instructions other than our natural instinct to move around. I have shown this game to many of my friends and I love seeing the confusion when this happens. I suppose it's to show his hesitance when exploring and how he's completely lost as to what to do, which is exactly how we feel too. After running around like a headless chicken for a bit, we encounter a strange red machine that Olimar dubs an onion, since it looks like the ones from his home planet. It releases a seed that sprouts and thus we are introduced to our first Pikmin. Olimar expresses intrigue for the fascinating creature who is staring back at him.
This functions as the tutorial level for Pikmin and features a total of 2 ship parts for Olimar to collect. One during the tutorial level and one once he has acquired more types of Pikmin. Impact Site serves as an excellent starting point to introduce people to the various gameplay elements of Pikmin in a relatively stress-free environment. This is in stark contrast to what Olimar will encounter in later levels, but we'll touch on those levels later.
Olimar then discovers that if a Pikmin cuts down a pellet posy and brings it back to the onion, he can propagate more Pikmin, and so the army building begins.
Olimar is initially presented with a simple challenge. Gather enough Pikmin to move a box out of the way. The total number of Pikmin required will float above the obstacle, and Olimar must gather and throw the Pikmin at the obstacle until the total amount is reached. Beyond this obstacle, Olimar will find his first ship piece. This is punctuated with some musical fanfare. The music of Impact Side is whimsical, endearing, and plucky. It features a curious harp-sounding synth plucking a cute and bouncy rhythm accompanied by some silly-sounding horns. It's all very comfortable but curious. This level is where you will encounter your first Pikmin type, the red Pikmin. These Pikmin are immune to fire and have the strongest attack damage out of all the Pikmin. Olimar is able to control the Pikmin by using his whistle to get their attention and round them up. The Pikmin will then follow Olimar around, maintaining distance where they can.
At the end of the day, Olimar lifts off in the Dolphin and writes a ship log about his surprise to the Onion following him. He makes the assumption that Pikmin cannot survive overnight and will die if left behind, or is there some other reasons? Either way, he is sure they will help him again tomorrow.
Taking off with Pikmin at night will become a cornerstone of Pikmin identity, and players would not be able to experience nighttime until Pikmin 4 release this year.
We will likely not return to Impact Site until later in the game when we have those other types of Pikmin. So, with our engine now in tow, we can now set off to our next area.
The Forest of Hope. The Forest of Hope is the first proper level in Pikmin, and it features a total of 7 ship parts for Olimar to collect.
This is where we will encounter our first dangers, other than being under the pressure of a ticking timer till we succumb to oxygen. But let's not think about that. We touch down in the area with some beautiful, reasonably calm music. It seems our adventurer is feeling somewhat hopeful about his chances of survival. First we must call our Pikmin out of their onion and send them to break down a wall. You may also find grass in this area which they can pull out to release nectar. Nectar causes Pikmin's leaf heads to change to pretty little flowers.
Pikmin have 3 stages of growth. They start out with just leaves sprouting from their heads, meaning the Pikmin have base stats. The second level is having a bud on their head, which leads on to the 3rd stage, which is where the bud blossoms into a flower. The Pikmin then gain boosts to speed and attack damage.
This can be achieved by eating nectar or leaving your Pikmin in the ground throughout the day to grow just like a plant would. Once past the wall, we see our first enemy, a dwarf bulbul, right next to a juicy bunch of pellet posies. It's time to rally your little fellas for their first battle.
Pikmin ain't as robotic and inorganic as your average infantry unit in RTS. They're bursting with character in everything they do. Pikmin require direction from the player at all times, as a single mistake can have catastrophic results for your Pikmin.
Yes, and by now you are likely very attached to every single one of these little guys. From occasionally falling over behind you while you're running, to how sweet they look in their little idle positions, or relaxed, their tiny cute little silly noises. They are hard not to fall in love with.
And so ensues the most challenging part of Pikmin. This requires the player to either charge in with the Pikmin by using the C stick to manually move the Pikmin in to engage an enemy, or using Olimar's throw ability to throw Pikmin onto the enemies.
Every type requires a different approach. For Bulbobs, usually it is most effective to throw them at their bums because this avoids the potential to throw them right into their mouth and give the enemy a carrot flavoured snack. Additionally, you can try one-shot them with a headshot, but the unpredictable nature, or perhaps the jank of Pikmin make this a very risky strategy.
The more Pikmin you manage to land on enemies, the more damage they will do, essentially acting as a swarm. Unfortunately, the enemies can shake the Pikmin off. If the enemy does manage to do this, it can then eat your Pikmin, who will die unless you kill the enemy before it swallows. They can also chomp down multiple Pikmin at once, which can very quickly turn a situation south if you cannot manage to rally the Pikmin back to you in time to be thrown back onto the enemy. The combat is therefore a tug of war between order and chaos. If you can maintain control of your Pikmin formation and keep things orderly, you will have minimal problems. But the moment you lose control of the Pikmin and they all get scattered around everywhere, it can be tough to gather them all back up without several getting gobbled up.
Many saves were abandoned due to this tragic loss of soldiers.
We believe that the core mechanics and gameplay loop of Pikmin is incredibly satisfying and unique in the way it utilizes different mechanics from different genres whilst creating its own unique style of gameplay. The combat in particular is engaging due to how quickly you can lose control if you're not careful and haven't thought out an approach to a situation. Some players might struggle with how everything can fall to pieces in just a moment, but for us it is a lot of fun to feel the pressure of each combat encounter. It really forces you to think and strategize about how you react to different situations. The lethality of combat is only made more exciting by how attached you are to them. This tends to make the player more cautious and play slower, but the sunset timer is a constant reminder that playing slower may not necessarily be the best idea. This cements the idea that Pikmin is all about maintaining pressure on the player. All of Pikmin mechanics create this constant sense of anxiety that makes the game's seemingly goofy and charming exterior all the more engaging.
There are many other enemies here, including standard Bulbobs, surprise Sheargrubs, horrifying Snagrits, and much more. But that's not the only threat. Only blue Pikmin can swim, so don't go exploring the water until you are back with some.
Here you will also encounter your next new Pikmin type, the yellow Pikmin. These Pikmin can be thrown the furthest by Olimar and can also carry bomb rocks, which are used constantly throughout the game for solving many different puzzles. The starting area for the Forest of Hope offers two paths to take, offering some small amount of player choice in how to approach the exploration of the area.
Something else I would also like to know is that you discover a Geiger counter here, which is ticking wildly. Olimar is shockingly unconcerned about this, but it certainly makes one question what this planet is. Is this Earth after a nuclear war? I mean, many objects seen throughout the world are much like those we have here, such as glass bottles. Pikmin 2 even further solidifies this theory. Are all these enemies just critters that have been evolved Fallout style? Much to think about. Anyways, on to the next area. The Forest Navel.
The Forest Navel is the third area that Olimar is able to visit once he collects enough parts to upgrade the range of his scanner. It is a considerable step up in terms of difficulty compared to the Forest of Hope, and has arguably some of the most challenging encounters in the game. There are 8 ship parts here, alongside a number of new enemies, and the final Pikmin type, the Blue Pikmin. Blue Pikmin can traverse through water without drowning, which opens up a lot of the previous levels. This encourages players to go back to previously explored areas to continue opening up areas that were once inaccessible. Unlike the areas in the Forest of Hope, the enemies in this area are much more dangerous and will require careful placement of Pikmin and skillful selection of which Pikmin type to attack enemies. Each enemy in this area is best countered with a specific type of Pikmin. For example, red Pikmin for blowhogs or blue Pikmin for the wollyhops. The starting area for the Forest Navel is significantly more complicated than the Forest of Hope, as it is on a flat top hill that is stepped, but the quickest ways up and down the hill are all blocked off by bomb walls with no bombs within easy access. This essentially forces the Pikmin to take the longest route when bringing ship parts back to Olimar's ship. This also forces Olimar himself to have to take the long way around too, which can very quickly waste precious sunlight time if Olimar isn't careful. The Forest Navel is the spookiest level in Pikmin due to its being situated presumably inside a hole. The music features a synthesized steel guitar slide that gives this area a goofy, groovy vibe.
Yes, I would describe this music as rather pungent. This level has always scared me a little because of its inherent danger. Things are also weird here. One of the first creatures you will meet is the bread bug. I love the bread bug. This silly creature does not harm your Pikmin but instead steals objects. Another weird thing here is the puffstool, who releases spores that turn your Pikmin against you. Lastly, there is the beady longlegs, who stomps on your Pikmin. Its weak spot is its torso, which you will have to use yellow Pikmin to reach. Boy, this place is certainly filled with surprises. One of my favourite parts has to be the puzzle on the western side of the map, which requires you to use all your different types of Pikmin strategically to obtain a ship part. I won't go into too much depth explaining how this is achieved, since I think it's best to play it for yourself. But as a puzzle lover, I really enjoyed this and would love to see more like this in future Pikmin games. Alrighty, after losing many brave soldiers in this area, it's time to move on to the next. Keep pushing on, Olimar!
The Distant Spring.
Woohoo! Water level time!
The Distant Spring is the final large stage, and with it a total of 9 ship parts to collect. The map features a larger amount of water than the previous 2 stages, forcing you to use the blue Pikmin for many of the level's puzzles. It features some new enemies, but most of the enemies are just alternative / stronger versions of enemies from the previous 2 levels. It also features a new type of interactable plant that can change your Pikmin into different Pikmin types if you throw them inside it. This is utilized for several different puzzles in this level. The soundtrack of this level is the most somber and sounds very distant and wailing. It sounds very much like the name of the level, distant and aquatic.
Yes, it seems our adventurer is getting towards the end of his journey and things are getting a bit more serious. I adore the atmosphere of this level. It's almost peaceful, but also very unsettling. Some structures seem man-made due to how straight cut they are. It's a rather maze-like area that has you constantly breaking down walls and trying to avoid the water or enemies who can interrupt their path. The enemies here are tough, including Bulbears, which are a stronger version of Bulborbs, a puffy blowhog who will blow all your non-blue Pikmin into the water, and the ever-threatening armoured cannon beetle. Something else to note is that on certain days, there are bosses that will appear in each of the areas. One of the ones in this level is the Smoky Prog, and let me tell you, you do not want to mess with this guy. Don't say I didn't warn you. If your Dandori skills are good enough, you will have ideally collected 29 ship parts with a couple days to spare, because you are going to need them for this next area. The final trial. It's time to finish this. The last part is here somewhere, but oh boy do we have a challenge ahead of us.
This entire level exists simply to fight Emperor Bulblax and to get the final piece of Olimar's ship, the money chest. Only with all 30 pieces can Olimar successfully get the best ending in the game. And it is worth it, as the bad ending is quite disturbing. Before you even get to the fight, you must accomplish a series of puzzles that will thoroughly test your patience, especially your ability not to accidentally throw bomb Pikmin and then whistle them back over to you, and your understanding of the game's mechanics. Once you have successfully finished the puzzle and gotten to the fight, you have a certain window of opportunity to skirt around him without initiating to position Pikmin and plan your attack. The key to winning this fight is honestly to cheat and use copious amounts of yellow Pikmin with bombs to stun the giant Bulblax, and then to follow this up with a deluge of red Pikmin. Seriously, do not underestimate how many Pikmin you will need to start firing at him like a machine gun. He gains a flying stomping ability that will absolutely decimate your Pikmin if you're not careful. Once he has lost a significant portion of his health, you'd best be wary of that and try to kill him as fast as possible. Once he is defeated and you have completed the most difficult challenge Pikmin has to offer, you can simply order your Pikmin to calmly take Olimar's main chest and carry it back to the ship. Know that you have bested the game and victory is yours. The music of this area is some of the best in the game, having this amazing stereo panned effect with consonant happy music in one ear and dissonant crunchy music in the other. It also plays a 2/3 polyrhythm which sounds so groovy, and an amazing marimba part and some awesome low heavy rhythmic piano riffs at parts. Contrasted against the silly bouncy melodies being played by the flute-like synth, this piece is truly one of the best, and it only gets better during the combat sections of the level.
I personally think the silly bouncy melodies are a representation of Nintendo laughing at you for dying so much. The tongue attack and those stomps, it's almost impossible unless you spam bombs, which makes for an awful noise that ruins your speakers. I would love to know how they intended for you to play this section, but I reckon they kind of wanted to mess with us. But yes, I think it is also worth checking out the different endings of the game, especially the bad ending, because that one gives me the heebie-jeebies. We won't spoil too much for you because we want you to play this for yourself. So that's Pikmin for you, a truly magical game. Despite its lack of commercial success, I can certainly see why Shigeru Miyamoto believed this would be the next Mario. This game truly marked a new era for Nintendo, with a fight for creativity over all else. He describes the gameplay as being like cooking because you have to manage many different processes at once, which I think is what makes it so addicting. It's so satisfying to collect more than one ship part a day and assign your Pikmin to different jobs. I also love how personal it is to him. He was inspired to make it after giving up his addictions and spending more time in his garden. Here he watched ants working together and pondered a game where a group of creatures were working together to achieve a certain goal, much opposed to the competition games which were very popular at the time. He also wanted to teach about life, caring for others, facing death and moving on from tragedy, which I think he certainly achieves. Despite losing so many Pikmin, they continue to band together and help save Olimar. This game urges you to keep pushing on amongst grim circumstances in the hopes that Olimar will see his wife and kids again. I really hope he continues to fight for more Pikmin games in the future, because there is simply nothing else like them. The music, the ambience, the aesthetic and gameplay are so unique. Seeing how well Pikmin 4 is going so far makes me think that there will indeed be many to come, which honestly brings a tear to my eye. And so Josh, what did you think of one of my favourite games in the world?
I think it was an incredible experience and one of the most unique games I've ever played. It is quite the spin on the good old RTS games that I'm used to playing. I cannot wait to see where the franchise goes from here. Did somebody mention caves?
If you made it this far and still haven't played any of the games yet, we really encourage you to. I think a lot of fans who like games like Animal Crossing will enjoy the new one. Or if you're up for a bit of a challenge and some good old game jank, start with the first two. There's no excuse now if you want to switch because they are all available on there. From both of us, thank you so much for watching.
To all you greenhorns that wanted to see the Covenant up close, this is your lucky day. Comment a ring emoji below if you know what game this is from. And we'll see you next time on a Washi Box.